The Salinas River is really the lifeblood of the Salinas Valley. The Salinas River is one of those rivers that flows from south to north. Not very many do that in the world. It starts in mid-San Luis Obispo County at the Santa Margarita Dam and then flows all the way up here and into the Monterey Bay. This valley has been caused by the various flows of the river over time. Just the ability of the river to braid or meander back and forth across the valley has produced this valley that has the sediments and soils necessary to produce the crops that really are what's made the Salinas Valley, the salad bowl of the world.
The Salinas River is a very important part of our environment, of agriculture, of the community, and of the economy of the beautiful Salinas Valley. But there was a lot of frustration over the last several years because no maintenance work had been done on the river in over 6 years. And that posed a lot of serious concerns with perhaps future flooding of the Salinas River if there were to be a major storm.
It's important to really understand how the river affects us all. This river is a wonderful natural resource. It's 90% flowing underground, and it provides significant recharge to our valley, which is important to all of us. It's important to agriculture, of course, as we need to irrigate our crops, but it's also important to how we in our cities get our water. And we're very fortunate to have this system. We as a community have built an infrastructure to allow for this river to be as productive as possible.
If the channel can't move the water that's coming, then the water is going to move out of the channel. And when it moves out of the channel, it's going to take farmland, it's going to take urban land, it's going to take pickup trucks, it's going to take livestock, it's going to take people. To try to do our best to manage what the damages could occur, we try to keep the channel clear of vegetation. And we had that process in place after the '95 flood. We had a permit from the Corps of Engineers that allowed us to come in and do that work. That permit ended in 2008, and there has not been any clearance or clearing work until this project here, this demonstration project.
As a member of Congress and federal agency, I got very interested in trying to do this Salinas River cleanup. It was something that I thought would be a really easy thing. It's about a 100-mile long river, the upside down river, and it's privately owned. It doesn't have the core levees that the San Lorenzo and Pajaro rivers have. So it was obviously, you just get the landowners together and they figure out a plan and do it. That's not the way it works. And it became obviously a very complex mess. And unfortunately, we have a lot of bureaucracies that have young staff that are learning about all this for the first time, and it doesn't fit into any typical, oh, this is a permit to do this. Well, you have to do it, think of Coastal Act, you have to do it 1, 2, 3, 4, you dot all the I's and cross all the T's, you get your permit. This is one where everybody's sort of confused as to what their role is. They want to err on the side of caution, which is go slow or don't do anything. And nobody wants to make a decision because that decision may not work, and therefore you have a liability and blame. We've got to get over that and figure, look, what an opportunity to show a private-public sector model for working with all kinds of agencies.
This is a new chapter in terms of working together on the Salinas River maintenance. It's very important because, you know, the Salinas River is a critical part of our water basin here in the Salinas Valley. It's important for agriculture, and I think it's been generations where the Salinas River, it's a respected river because when storms do come, it could pose major threats to agriculture and flooding of a significant part of our Salinas Valley.
The fact that our legislative delegation came on board, our congressmen and even the governor's office, they recognized the importance of getting in there and clearing the river, because at the end, What we don't want to happen is like the floods that we had in '95 and prior years, where it could devastate our whole valley economy in agriculture.
If it was a street, the city or the county would have a plan for how to keep it paved and fill in the potholes. It would have a response system. If it were a power line, the power companies would be responsible for it. You can find all these other analogies where we have an ability to respond, to know what we're going to do. We can do it in an emergency situation on a moment's notice. We don't have anything like that for the river. We're inventing it, and we're inventing it at a time when the rules are always changing. So the difficulty is, how do you find a permanent solution to this river? I think you have to have a management plan, which we're working on.
I began having discussions and being part of discussions about the Salinas River about 8 years ago, although I did grow up along the river down in the San Lucas area. And the discussions at that time were frustrated and were concerned because quite a bit of the way that we look at and interpret policy had changed, and the different permitting agencies that provide us the permits to work on the river were now no longer looking at things in a similar fashion. And we needed a change, but we didn't know what the change would or could look like. And it took us many years. The County of Monterey began working on an EIR, an environmental impact report, in order to allow us kind of a first step for getting our permits. And in that process, we started having conversations with the Nature Conservancy, and that happened a little more than a year ago. And in those conversations, we began building quite a bit of trust. And there were a few leaders in agriculture, landowners and operators, who took a chance and said, we're going to work with our trade organizations, the Salinas River Channel Coalition, and the Nature Conservancy and the County of Monterey to try to find a solution. And that's what we've done here.
We are working with folks to deal with a habitat improvement project that also provides flood benefit, and we're helping them do it in a manner that is compliant with the environmental regulations that control the river. Rhododendron or Arundo or giant reed or false bamboo or dumb cane, it's got a lot of names, not all of them more than 4 letters, was brought in earlier part of the 20th century, maybe in the 40s, 50s, 60s, by the USDA, possibly also the Army Corps, as a means of providing erosion control. It's very successful at establishing itself and anchoring its location. Unfortunately, it's also very successful at spreading and displacing other vegetation. And so what we have here, some of this was planted along the riverbank that we're on, or on the levee to protect it. But then the whole area behind me is land that it's spread it into. And it's a plant that doesn't spread by seed, it spreads by plant parts. So as it gets broken up in a storm and carried downstream, it establishes there too. So what ends up happening is you have a river that's full of this plant that not only displaces other vegetation, but then makes it more flood prone because it's stiff and upright. And when it's really tall and beefy, it can be up to 20 feet tall. So it slows water down and makes it back up. And it also, when water slows down, any dirt or sand in it tends to settle out. And so it actually causes the river bottom to rise in terms of sand, making even less water capable to pass through. If I were to take this stem here and cut it and just drop it with all this green material, every one of these nodes could start a new plant. And oftentimes what will happen is it'll sit there, and if it gets carried by water and sets in a low spot with moisture, it'll send roots down, and then you've got several new plants starting from each of these nodes. So we have to be very careful to not only break the plant down, but make sure that it's not able to reproduce. Now, Arundo doesn't go quietly. You have to get it at it several times. And so we're planning on multiple retreatments. So what we're doing this year, because it's so dry that there's very few plants that are actually green like this that are worth applying herbicide to, we're actually mowing first and grinding down all the dry stuff so that next year, when it comes back up from the roots, we'll have what looks basically like a cornfield. Dense, green, lush, and a reasonable height for treatment. None of this 10 or 20 foot stuff that you have to get on a ladder and pull down and mess with or spray over your head. And so we'll come through with herbicide on that, and that should burn all that stuff right down, but we expect there will be resprouts. And so every few years we'll come in after that and treat those resprouts as they come. The Salinas River is very prone to flooding. In the lowlands where there's farmland, that it's abutted up next to it, and in a big storm, this river has spilled out and caused dramatic damage, because people are very nervous about the potential for flooding. And so then it just turns out the Nature Conservancy, they just really turned it on last year about this time to help get a demonstration project for the stream maintenance program. So this and that happening at the same time is, there's just a lot of activity. And it's exciting to be able to demonstrate to the water resource agencies that this can be done in an environmentally sensitive manner, and it's compelling and important work for public safety. And so that opens that door and builds that trust for more work on the river.
We're in the Gonzales River Management Unit here, and right now we're kind of on this higher terrace above the low flow channel. So people don't realize that this is a thick riparian corridor with a lot of diverse vegetation, and actually in a pretty small flood event, this would all be inundated with water for short periods of time, and then the water would recede and go back into the low flow channel, which is what most people see as they cross bridges and they see a white sandy open area. That's what most people consider the river. Well, that's really the low flow channel. So in a semi-arid climate like this, it's going to be dry often, and then in the larger event, these areas would be inundated for short periods of time. So this channel was first of all designed through a flood model, so looking at vegetation communities and how the water worked, we recognized that this would be a great place for a secondary channel. It's already naturally formed and we need to enhance it. But in this area there are species that really are underrepresented in the river, and so we want to encourage the diversity of habitat by increasing cottonwoods and alder and sycamore, and not encouraging more willow growth. And so in this situation, that's probably a 60-year-old cottonwood there. And so it was very important to the landowner, and it's very important to the project to increase those species. And so it was retained. And you can see there are other cottonwoods off in the distance. You can see the mulching. So wherever there's that light colored mulching, that was solid cane through there. These trees have been carefully selected based on their location and their type to remain here. And that was through the design committee, we really made these parameters that trees like this in this type of location is very critical for the area as we restore the area. And so they were consciously left here. And the landowners have been great about saying, that tree is actually important to me as well, and we're leaving it here. So there is some freedom in an area like this to remove the vegetation, but you'll still see there are clumps that are left.
For any work to be done in the channel, a series of permits need to be acquired. And for the local landowner who's trying to do it on his own, it's very expensive. So this process has allowed a group of growers or landowners to get together and kind of share the cost and with the others, the nature conservancies and the other folks involved. Some of the factors were that the regulatory environment had changed. The Salinas River has become identified as critical habitat for steelhead, as well as other endangered species like the red-legged frog or leaf-tailed vireo. The Salinas Lagoon has a tidewater goby, another little fish. But all these various species that are endangered or threatened need to be protected also. And so then you come into well, how do we best manage the river for habitat, for flood control, for water conservation, meaning the percolation into the groundwater? There's a lot of competing interests. And so we at the agency have had to find a way to manage those interests and get everybody to come together. And that was really what this process allowed with ourselves and the Nature Conservancy and the Channel Coalition and Grower Shippers Agency or Association and others.
It's been sort of a long time coming in terms of bringing all these things together. And then the key next step is going to be, okay, that's a $1 million grant, which is nothing to sneeze at, but this stuff is probably $10,000 an acre to control. And if we're dealing with thousands, over 1,000 acres, it's a lot of money. And so this will give us, hopefully, the first 200 acres or so, if we include what the landowners contribute and the Ag Commissioner is putting in resources, as well as providing the herbicide for future year treatments. So it's going to be 10, 20 years of work on the river. One thing you'll notice is it dry as a bone, and there is very little for wildlife out here. We do have a team of biologists that come out and preview the area beforehand, and we have seen lots of pig activity, and they're everywhere. And we've seen evidence of past use of the area, like with wood rats and some abandoned nests. Occasionally we'll see a raptor flying overhead, and they're really looking forward to a free lunch. As soon as a critter jumps out of the bushes in front of the mowers, they try to grab them. But evidence of wildlife has been absolutely minimal, especially related to amphibians. That's really the thing that the wildlife agencies are the most concerned about, the stuff that's totally water dependent. And the river, all the little puddles and low spaces around it are just dry as a bone. So not a frog, not a salamander, not a tadpole, certainly no fish. And so it's just, it's mammals here and there. And the one beaver we did find had been dead for a while. Right next to its dam, it was full of sand. Poor guy, he just had nothing left. We've also found evidence of mountain lion, just scat and a couple tracks. So, they're visiting the area, but they want to go where the water is, and it's just not here. So that's a real boon for the project because we're able to do more work because there's nobody to hurt. And the Arundo provides effectively no habitat. I understand there are some creatures that can use it for cover, but as a food resource, it's effectively nil. And as a cover resource, it's not very effective either. And it's definitely not good for predators who have a really hard time moving through it and getting prey. So fortunately, it's a plant that everybody loves to hate, even the wildlife.
You'll notice out here today that there are a number of different flags being used. And what those are doing, they're marking off areas where we can kind of travel. They're marking off areas that we can maintain and clear to, but they're also marking off areas that are critical habitat. And I think that the way that we're looking and talking about critical habitat and beneficial use is a little bit different. Even though we were doing that previously, there's more science that we've been able to bring in thanks to the Nature Conservancy's work, and we're able to really maintain the river in the areas that are going to be most beneficial, both in a flood event, but also most beneficial to habitat.
This demonstration project has 29 secondary channels. So these are areas that would activate once the water in the low flow channel gets higher. And so we demarcated the areas with blue flagging. So the perimeter of the secondary channel has blue flagging so that the operators know this is the perimeter, you don't go beyond it. And you clear out between the blue flags. When there are species of concern, and they're really species that we want to continue to have flourish here, they'll be tagged with the orange-red flagging, and those are signaling to the operator to avoid. So any avoidance area is clearly marked out so that it is not harmed. And it is also the data is also collected electronically so that the people that are on the ground here can be watching and making sure everything's inventoried and protected as it was intended. The data is collected using an application and a device, and so there's an application called Collector, and you go in and you can draw polygons and point data, and it's all through GPS. And so then the data's synced at the end of every day, so there'll be maybe 6 or 7 people out here collecting data. It's synced back into a database in the cloud, and that way everyone has the most up-to-date data electronically whenever they're out here, so at any time notes and interesting features can be documented.
Hopefully what we get out of this is a demonstration that the river can be healthy and that we can maintain and clean it up on an annual basis, and that we can do the whole 100-mile stretch.
There are a number of my members who are really interested in what we're calling phase 2 of this project, and we're already sitting down with the county, we're already talking to the Nature Conservancy and our partners in agriculture about what that looks like. So we're working with one of the lead facilitators on this project right now to start looking at what future boundaries might look like and make the most sense both scientifically and how we get people to collaborate in a group. I have high hopes that in the next few years we're going to see more of these management units spread out across the 94 miles of the river, and that's my goal. That's what we're already starting to work on.
What's needed in this from going forward is trust. The growers, the landowners need to trust that the agencies are on their side. And the agencies need to trust that the growers aren't out there to destroy the environment. And as long as we can build that trust and listen to each other and have a common goal that we're going to solve this, because it's in the best interest of everybody. It's the best interest of these agencies to show that these regulations that they're managing can be applied, can function. No is not the answer. So I think that the best thing out of this is building this trust, and let's hope that we can keep it moving forward.
Everybody recognized the importance of coming together, and it's just one of those where we can't afford to fail. We had to be successful, and I think this is the fruits of everybody staying at the table and not walking away or not getting uptight, and also recognizing with the regulatory agencies, look, we want to do the right thing.
It showed, I think, the farmers, it showed environmental organizations, it showed local, state, and federal agencies, and certainly all the elected officials, that if we can follow all the rules and regulations that are required, but we could do it in a way where we reach some compromise, reach agreement, and see work happen. And I think we needed that at this time. It's the right time for us to see that work was accomplished in 2014, and it's going to set the groundwork, the framework for additional work to be done in the other almost 90 miles of the beautiful Salinas River. This was once a battle. It's now collaboration and compromise and accomplishing great work along the beautiful Salinas River.
We're on the right path. We've been working with, very closely with the regulatory agencies and the community, all the stakeholders, and I think that we're on this path that, had a rough start. We were really unsure of where to go next, and I think we found that vehicle to move forward. And so I do envision that additional work will happen, with a very scientific approach and in a very careful manner. I see that people are taking this very seriously and considering what they're doing really has a bigger impact, and really this is an education. We're learning so much about the river that we didn't know, and this is going to help feed us into, the future.